Hey Tony, it's Friday, and first off, to answer your question of the week, there are two other cons I can think of in the Ohio area. One is BashCon, which takes place in Toledo, usually in February,
Around the 14th.
right around Valentine's Day, as Taylor said. It's run by the organization Taylor and I were a part of while in undergrad called Bash. I never went, but I heard it was a pretty good time. The other one I can think of is, I want to say it's called OhioCon. I think it's in Columbus, but I'm not sure on that. But those are the two I can think of. I've never been to a convention in Ohio. The only convention I've ever actually been to was NerdCon Nerdfighteria. So I don't really know, but those are my two best guesses. So what I want to talk about this week is what I'm going to entitle The Ministry of Post-Truth. Now, I'm not sure you're going to get that reference, but it's a reference to the George Orwell novel 1984. I don't know if you've read 1984. If you have, then what I'm about to say is going to be a little bit redundant. But if you've not read it, what I'm going to say will help make more sense. So, 1984 is a dystopian novel written by George Orwell. He wrote it in 1948, and it was published in 1949. Basically, what it is the main character, Winston Smith, is a member of a totalitarian country. He's an outer party member, so he's really kind of essentially middle working class. But that's where he's at. And it explains how the government, in a surveillance state, essentially makes the truth their own and makes it so you only owe allegiance to Big Brother. Big Brother is the leader of Oceania, which is where the novel takes place. But that's a basic overview of it. If you haven't read it, you really should. It's really excellent. And one of my favorites. I could talk longer on it, but I don't want to because I want to get to a different point in this video. So the reason why I'm calling this the Ministry of Post-Truth is because the ministry that Winston Smith works for is called the Ministry of Truth. And they essentially control propaganda, lying, and whatever, and the information you receive. So I know you don't really read the news much, but this week the Trump administration did something really, really weird that gave me strong 1984 vibes. More so than what they've done in the past. But they decided to rebrand coal as freedom molecules, and they decided to rebrand natural gas as freedom gas. Now, this sounds like it's an Onion article, but it's not, unfortunately. But the reason why this really made me think of 1984 is because the way the Ministry of Truth controls information is through their own lens. And a lot of the things they do set up using different words to make it so it doesn't have the negative connotation you would think before. Two of the good examples of this are Victory cigarettes and Victory gin. The word itself is meant to make it seem as if you only the winners drink and smoke this, and it's what the government gives you. But they're really low quality, really bad for you, but they're still rebranded as Victory gin and Victory cigarettes. So just hearing the freedom molecules and freedom gas really made me do a double take, because this is an effort by the government to try and, I'll say it like this, it's not the best way to say it, but to try and limit what we try and do. Because obviously coal and natural gas are on the way out. Coal more so than natural gas, but even natural gas has its own issues. But the Trump administration has been huge on trying to save coal, even though those jobs aren't coming back. But the world's evolved from it. Coal is really bad, it's terrible for people, and it is incredibly inefficient. But this is all part of a general scheme to make people believe the misinformation. The other thing that Winston works for in the Ministry of Truth is not only setting up the propaganda, but setting up words you use, and also setting up what is true. And you've heard me mention before that we live in what's called the post-truth world, in which facts don't really matter so much as the emotions and who's saying these facts that they're claiming. Some of the big ones that you can think of are, windmills cause cancer. They don't. Climate change is a hoax by China. It's not. And there are a whole list of things the Trump administration has said, including the phrase of alternative facts. Now, as soon as Sean Spicer said alternative facts, back when Trump was first had his inauguration, 1984 became the most downloaded book, most ordered book that day, because it rings true. The government is trying to control our flow of information, control what we believe is true, to prove their point. This was even said when President Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, said that truth isn't truth. Also, you have other phrases of truth is just hearsay. And it all goes into a point of the government is trying to make it so we don't understand what's going on, because then their viewpoint seems to be more true. Another one of the big things that Winston Smith does in the Ministry of Truth is he destroys all remnants of the past. That includes language itself and images and so many other things. You could even see that as well, images in particular. So when George Orwell wrote 1984, one thing that really brought him into the unperson or the disappearance of people was that Soviet Russia would do that frequently. There was a picture of Joseph Stalin and one of his top aides who ended up possibly, allegedly, or maybe not, betraying Stalin and was executed because of it. But he wasn't just executed. His image was removed from everything. There was no other remnants that he ever existed. He disappeared. And you can see some minor effects of that today. I think this week in particular you saw how President Trump is trying to, even, for lack of a better term, eliminate John McCain from his site. I don't know if you read this as well, but when President Trump was in Japan for a meeting, there was a battleship there called the USS John McCain that was actually covered over they covered the name with a tarp and covered it with a barge. Now, John McCain was a frequent critic of President Trump and someone who President Trump admitted he never liked. And you can kind of see how, now that order might have come from him, it might not have, but it still was the point of eliminating this rival from the images that the president would see and from the images that other people would see, which equals into a disappearance in a way. So all of these events of the past few weeks have really got me thinking about 1984 and how eerily prophetic George Orwell was. Now, there are a lot of things that aren't true yet, because a lot of what was set up with 1984 is basically a constant state of making people poor, but making them think they're rich. And there are another couple things there, and just in general controlling information. Government controls a lot of information now, but they're not at the point of seeing a poor person and saying, no, you're actually rich, and making you believe that. But that's a point we could get to. You people who think they're middle class that aren't, people who think they're upper class that aren't. And it all kind of continues a cycle. Now, I'm probably going to talk more about some dystopian novels in the next few weeks, because they're really starting to ring true. Next week, unless something unforeseen happens, I'll probably start talking about Fahrenheit 451 a little bit, because I want to reread the book, and there are a lot of things that Fahrenheit 451 did that also really equate to the modern day. So, Tony, my question for you is, what is your favorite dystopian novel? Tony, I'll see you on Tuesday. Later, bro.